please share the show with your friends. Like the show wherever you're watching, whether it be on X, it's on Rumble, it's on YouTube, wherever you're finding us. Just smash that thumbs up button for us. And please subscribe to the channel wherever you are. This is how the show grows. And hopefully you'll like what you see in this particular show.
This guy is a grifter.
Let's get into the first topic here, and that is a discussion of early voting that we're seeing in a lot of the battleground states here. So, Ross, I don't know if you've noticed this, and frankly, I didn't put up the clip to talk about it. Maybe I should right now. Let me find this clip right now to get the conversation started concerning the activity we're seeing in the early voting grounds that seem to be pointing the way towards Republicans having a good election cycle.
Yeah, and on that note, I lost track of this, Gene. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to ask you real quick, New York, do they have early voting now there?
I think we have some form of early voting. I don't know when exactly it starts or not. I can certainly look it up while we're looking at this clip, though. So let's go through this first. Listen to this and tell me what you take from it.
Let's bring in ABC's Washington bureau chief and political director, Rick Klein, with the breakdown of the latest numbers. And Rick, we're already seeing meaningful signs in who's casting those early ballots.
Yeah, Martha, the final day of voting still 16 days away, but already more than 13 million Americans have cast their ballots. Now, that's actually down significantly from where it was 4 years ago. But of course, that was the COVID year when record numbers of people were voting early and by mail. In Georgia, just this past week, the first day of in-person voting set a new record. So it does look like we're on track to have a very high turnout election, particularly in the battleground states. In fact, there's more than 1 million people that have voted early already in both Georgia and Michigan. Now, we're not going to know for a while, till election night or even later than that, exactly who people voted for. But based on the likely partisanship of the voters that we've seen so far, we're seeing more Republicans as a share of the electorate than Democrats. Take a look at that. 4 years ago, less than a third, only 32% of people that had voted so far were Republicans. That's up 6 points so far this cycle. Now, that could be a sign of enthusiasm among Republicans. It could be because Donald Trump is sometimes at least supporting early voting. And it may.
Well, let's take a look at this chart, pal. I know he mentioned, Mr. Klein here mentioned the +6 from the last presidential cycle for Republican early voting, but he neglected to mention the -4 on the Democrat side. That's a 10-point swing.
Yeah, well, not only the swing, it's the total votes too. So that the numbers percentage-wise might be somewhat impressive, and I am impressed by what the Republicans are imagining to do here. But when you look at the overall numbers, early voting period is down. And who will that hurt more? The Democrats, right? Because that's where they stole the election basically on the last one. And by steal, I do mean it literally, right? They had millions of early votes and mail-in votes. And this cycle, they're down by 30, 40, maybe 50% in some of these states.
Yeah. Oh, so Jeff wanted to say the worst part about living in Vermont during election season is hearing all the commercials from New York and New Hampshire. Really? Is that the worst part about living in Vermont? Really? I mean, no offense to anybody from Vermont on here other than Jeff, of course, but is that really the worst part about living in Vermont? It's not.
But I'm curious, who's spending money in New York on commercials?
There are a couple of races that are close. You have Mondaire Jones going up against Michael Lawler in New York.
It's the congressional seats.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And you'll get, so you probably maybe get some from Long Island, but some close races in the People's Republic of New York. Yes, there are a couple.
I was going to say, listen, I drank the Kool-Aid. I do think New York's in play because Trump said it, joking. But I can't imagine they'd be spending a lot of money, neither him nor Kamala.
Oh, no. New York, I think New York's pretty locked up. Which is why I disagree with Trump coming to New York for that rally in Madison Square Garden. It's kind of stupid. But I know what you're saying about the chart here with the early tally numbers and how they're down, and that also favors Republicans here, I think, especially Trump. But he really didn't make it clear if this is the number comparing the length of time in early voting back in 2020 or if this was 2020 total. You know what I mean? If it's down from 2020 to date, then yeah, I would agree with you. But if it's just the first week of early voting and maybe you're going to end up with 10, 12 million by the end of it when it's all said and done in the states that he's mentioning there, that could be significant.
I'm hoping that's this date in history, because Pennsylvania, they are significantly down. Ryan Godersky's been doing a pretty good job tracking that.
Yeah, our boy Ryan. We can say we knew him when he's did a couple of shows with us and had a good time doing it. I'm glad to see all the success he's having as well. But yeah, he is killing it.
Yeah,
Let's go through some raw numbers though, and I want you to be able to see these, pal. This is up to date, up to the moment. Let me get the banner down for a moment here. This is up to the minute news of the date that we're taping this live. We're looking at the RCP average, and it's Trump across the board. Highest in Arizona, but holding his own in Pennsylvania as well. Surprising that he's holding on in North Carolina. I've heard some numbers there that shows a lot more of a female vote coming out early, and people seem to think that that's bad for Trump, and also the top of the ticket drag for governor going on there as well. And of course, Georgia, he's doing well in as well here. Pretty interesting stuff here, my friend, that Trump is leading in these battlegrounds.
Yeah, and the numbers are small with the when you consider the average. But the real thing to look at, and I encourage everyone to go to Real Clear and take a look at it, because when you click on these individual states, it'll show you this date in history for 2016 and 2020. And in all of these places, including the national average, Trump was down about 5 or 6 points to Hillary Clinton in a lot of these places on this date in 2016. And with Biden, he was down even more, like 8-9 points in a lot of these places. Right. So for Trump to actually be ahead in the average this late in the game, if there's any polling error in favor of Trump, he's gonna walk away with this thing. And additionally, to get these averages red, leaning Trump, that means the trend line had to be going Trump for the last several weeks, because she had a significant lead in the average for most of September. It wasn't until October where he started getting slight leads in these polls. So that this is the trend. The momentum is on Trump's side for sure.
Yeah, the trend is certainly his friend, considering comparisons to 2020. But also remember, Trump traditionally underpolls in races. In the last 2 races, the polls had overestimated Democrat support. So even though that Biden was trending around, I guess, like 3 to 5% in most battlegrounds, he was actually it was much closer than that in those battlegrounds as well. So if this is what the polls are saying, and the trend is his friend, seems like Trump is doing pretty well. He's sitting pretty when it comes to these numbers.
Yep. And just a quick note on North Carolina. So North Carolina, their early voting numbers are through the roof, and the Republicans are coming out in mass. So my suspicion on the last few polls that came out in North Carolina that show Harris either tied or a little bit ahead, I don't think they can find these voters. Many of them were displaced, but they're figuring out a way to vote, I think. Right? So Trump won North Carolina both in 2016 and 2020. I don't see him losing it. Nothing post-Hurricane Helene would indicate that Trump would lose support in North Carolina. It's just not happening.
That I do want to focus on one aspect of this turnout, this early voting turnout. There's no way for us to really tell, based upon like the actual numbers themselves, whether the surge in early voting that we're seeing is the result of your what we like to call triple prime voters showing up early, or if there are new voters coming to the polls right now. Except in Pennsylvania, I did find some numbers here about the propensity of the voter turning out right now. So this was courtesy of a reporter named Eric Doherty out of Florida, who's been crunching a lot of numbers on X. And as you see here, based upon his evaluation, the Democrats are leading in Pennsylvania with the mail-in vote, but Republicans are turning out what they call low propensity voters, people who don't normally turn out to vote. That's an encouraging sign for Trump once again.
100%. And the question that you raised is actually an important one, right? So Republicans are embracing somewhat this voting early strategy. Are they voters who would have voted anyway on election day? Valid question. I heard this earlier today, and I believe it. 90% of people that intend to vote on election day will make it to the polls. But 10%, for whatever reason, they got a flat tire, they got stuck at work late, the kid got sick, whatever it could be, somewhere between 5 and 10% of people who fully intended to vote on election day don't make it. This is one of the reasons why we have to embrace the early voting, right? Because, yeah, they might have been people who intended to vote anyway on election day, but if 10% of your base doesn't wind up voting, that can translate into 2% out of the general election, 2, 3, 4%, right? So bank these votes early, and instead of 90% getting to the polls, we get to 95, 96% of people who intend to vote actually vote. That's the difference in a lot of these states that were decided by less than 1 point.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who don't know, a low propensity voter, a voter that doesn't normally turn out, that's like getting 2 votes, because you're cutting into the Democrats' advantage in voter turnout, like he's talking about here in Pennsylvania, and you're adding 1 to your column that wouldn't have been there but for your efforts in trying to turn out that vote. The more of those 1 and 2 vote conversions that you can get, it doubles its value, really.
Yeah, and if you're out there in a place like Pennsylvania or anywhere else that has a competitive Senate race, you gotta vote for that Republican running for the Senate, right? A lot of the things that you want to happen simply cannot happen unless you control both houses of Congress, right? Because even with the Senate, it's going to be real hard to do things because you're never going to get 60 votes on your column, right? You're going to have to convince some Democrats to come across. But if you don't have the 51, you're not going to get anything ever. It's just not going to be possible.
Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. So we've talked about the 30,000-foot view of battleground states in general. We zoomed in on Pennsylvania, which we know is a pivotal state for both candidates. It's sort of a must-win for both of them. We've talked about the voter gravity, really, of who's turning out, whether it be high turnout triple prime voters or low propensity voters. We haven't talked about the ethnicity or religious background or anything like that. But we do have some data we can pull from concerning that. There was recently a poll done by YouGov and Arab News, which has some surprising results and may impact what we're seeing in a place like Michigan or what we might see in other urban areas around the country.
How are the numbers?
Here it is. Let me put that up on the screen now. This is Stream of consciousness, yes. So let me, before we get to the fun, this is from Arab News Research and Studies and YouGov. They put together a nice polling package here of what Arab Americans want. They give us, see, the reason why I take polls like this credible is because, as you see here, there is a breakdown of their methodology, the breakdown of the gender, the marital status, the education levels, the age groups. Lots of good stuff here and some information you can check out. And then when you get to the polls, you get to this. This is the meat and potatoes of it. Which of the following candidates would you be most likely to vote for? 2 things I take from this. Trump is up by 2, and Jill Stein is over 4%, with an undecided of 6. So that might shift the balance one way or the other. But I did not expect this to be nearly as close as what you're seeing here, pal.
Well, what I love is that the Democrats' strategy of identity politics is blowing up in their face, right? They can't cater to the Jewish bloc and the Arab bloc / Muslim bloc with a message. There's no way they can get both of them. So they're going to piss off one, the other, or both. And it seems like Kamala's doing an excellent job of pissing off both constituencies, especially the Arab Americans, right? Who are, I would argue, are probably less likely to vote for a female candidate to begin with. And Trump is doing very well with male voters of all ethnicities and religions, especially the Arabs.
Well, I think people underestimate the religious conservatism of the population as well. I think that Democrats see color and just assume that they're in their column, but it's not that easy, I don't think, anymore.
No. And the perfect example of that really is, and this is delicious that this blew up in their face too, Trump is actually leading in several polls amongst Hispanic voters, right? The legal citizens with Hispanic origins are leaning Trump, right? That is a disaster. I guarantee you, if somehow the Democrats ever regain power, if that holds steady, where Hispanic voters are leaning Republican, they will move to close that border ASAP.
I would think so. Deborah, thanks for the comment. Those undecided voters are slowly coming out of the woodwork, and I think because of early voting, we're seeing that. By the way, People's Republic of New York, October 26th is when early voting starts. There's only 1 week of early voting. You mentioned the Hispanic vote. I didn't grab anything on that, but when we go back to the RCP Battleground averages that they're finding, you see Arizona, Trump is up almost 2 points. And if you look at what's happening in Florida right now, remember when Florida used to be a swing state? It ain't swinging no more. When you're having turnout in Miami-Dade, that is huge for Trump right now. I never thought I'd see the day that a big city like a Miami would turn red, pal. It's proof that it can happen.
Yeah, I was listening to Senator Marco Rubio the other day, and he was saying, historically in Florida, you can lose Miami-Dade and still win the state, but you got to keep it somewhat close. He said he's thinking Miami-Dade is going to be red for sure this election. And speaking of Hispanics and other places, the chart you had up from Real Clear, they have a high voter population in both Arizona and Nevada. Now, Arizona historically leaned right. So that one should be secure, right? Even though it has a very large Hispanic population, and I think that they're going to solidify that. Nevada is the more interesting one to me. Nevada is not really, does not lean right. It might be considered a swing state, but it goes Democrat more often than not as of late, right? But a very large Hispanic population in Nevada, I think, is tipping the scales in Trump's favor.
Funny you should mention Nevada. I did show prep on this too. This is from the Nevada Independent. They keep a running blog about early voting here. So this was updated. Looks like the last update was early this morning as we taped the show. Statewide, Republican plus 12,000 or 3.5%. And they're talking about the Clark County firewall, which is what's in Las Vegas. So in all total, 333,000 people voted. If turnout reaches 1.4 million, that means just under a quarter of the vote would be in. The mail pushed Clark County's share of the vote to just under 73%. But when you look at the numbers, Republicans have a 2.5% turnout edge. What does this mean according to this article? It means that if you look at the numbers right now, Trump turnout is about plus 12,000-ish or so, as we said earlier. Harris needs to be winning independent voters by double digits to be winning if she and Trump hold on to their bases. So if Republicans vote Republican, Democrats vote Democrat, Harris needs to win independents by more than 10%.
Ay, caramba!
According to this blog, Republicans usually win election day, so you would rather be them right now. And asking the same question that we were asking before is who exactly is showing up to vote? Is it the same voters in rural Nevada going on right now? Or is it low propensity voters that we're seeing in Pennsylvania, pal?
Yeah, so a quick note on independent voters, people who claim to be independent and are not registered in either the Republican or Democratic Party. My view on those people they are from one of two camps. First camp is they are a disaffected Republican, right? They, like me, really. I don't want to be associated with the Republican Party. I despise them. But I will never vote for a liberal Democrat. I'm not going to pull a Liz Cheney and run around with Kamala Harris and vote for her because I just can't, right? But I don't like the Republican Party. So what do you do? You register independent, you flirt with the Libertarians or a conservative party in New York, some third party, but you come back home and you vote for the Republican candidate. Most of them, the vast majority of disaffected Republicans. The other side of that coin are disaffected Democrats. But those ones are the Tulsi Gabbards and RFK Juniors of the world, where the party left them. And now they can no longer be a Democrat. Now, I know Tulsi Gabbard just announced she is now a Republican, but RFK Jr. likely will never become a Republican. But he's certainly not a Democrat anymore. But now he falls into that independent camp. So whenever the race is going to be decided by independents, I think the Republicans have a huge edge when that's the decision.
If you like that clip from our new show, Behind the Enemy Lines, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any other shows, and tune in live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.